Excellent, thank you. I think I'd like to start first with a couple of questions, and I'll sort of direct the first one at Trevor, because we talk about the importance of collaboration between brands and bands, and obviously we had the brand on the wall debate yesterday in the city. How important, you don't have to supposedly talk just about Umbro, but looking at the sports apparel industry, how important do they rank music as an emotional trigger? You know, is it a key part of the thinking when somebody says, right, we've got a demographic, maybe 14 to 24, 25 for a product? What are the things they start thinking about as the emotional triggers? Is music up there, or is it video games, or how do you, from experience, how does that sort of sort out?
I think it's definitely up there. As you know, in my little intro piece, I said that our belief is that music and football are the two biggest shared cultures in the world. So certainly for us, and I think most of the sporting goods brands, music is an integral part of their mix right now. I think the difference in a lot of brands is how actually it's true to them. I think music has become a little bit of a box ticking exercise for certain brands, that they feel they have to do something with music rather than actually having a truth around music or a real rationale for getting involved. So it's definitely critically important. Across the sporting goods industry, most people are probably engaging with music to different levels. I would question how many are really doing it for the right reasons and how many are doing it because they feel it's something they should do. You know, in a little way that, you know, things like social media or different aspects of culture today feel like every brand must do them. I think music has become a little bit like that for sporting goods. So hopefully we're taking a little bit of a different approach here, and in our conversation earlier on with the guys here, we're trying to build from the bottom up rather than just trying to get one of our garments on a superstar. We're doing a much more grassroots attack with unsigned bands, with up and coming DJs and promoters, and working it through a Mancunian lens.
And you're finding that obviously, I mean, these days it's a multi-channel approach, whether it's mobile, whether it's web, whether it's an app, whether it's blogging. Because the interesting thing I found out over the last couple of weeks, I went up to do a masterclass up at LIPA, Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, and traditionally in my day, to find out about new music was all about watching Top of the Pops or listening to the charts on Radio 1 or maybe John Peel. So you had a trusted source, traditionally, who would guide you to what was relevant and new. And you might end up going to HMV, you might sort of go through some racks and find some discs. But I asked this group of students, what's the number one way that you discover music these days? And they all put their hand up and said blogging, because they're using blogs now as the trusted source. So when you're looking at integrating a campaign or maybe using music, and of course you've obviously got the great heritage of Umbro in Manchester, you would look the various ways that music is disseminated out, or obviously when you're looking for new bands, the way that buzz is created is not sort of the old traditional top-down industry approach, as you said. It's sort of bottom-up. It's the consumer tells you what's relevant, not some industry executive in London saying, I think I'll, pick out this Rosemary Clooney hit from 1952 and slap it on a Levi jeans ad and try and make it a hit. So obviously I would imagine sort of blogging and all the sort of integration of the different media, that's very important when you're looking at putting a campaign together around music and sport.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking to go bottom up, as I said. We've appointed someone actually to work in the city, to just get out, see gigs, meet promoters, talk to people, like some of the guys on the panel tonight, actively, that we haven't met yet, and we're going to kind of forge relationships on the back of this. So there is, the channels aren't the old channels anymore.
Yeah.
We have done some campaigns in the last 18 months through some of the major record labels, as well as working with unsigned bands in Manchester. We've worked with some of the major labels, working with the unsigned guys and at a more strategic level in the city. It's so much more easy than dealing with the majors and all the complexities. And for brands like us, it's a minefield. We need to employ additional external expertise.
Well, I think that's the key thing for anybody that's looking to integrate brands and bands, is that you've got the legacy of people who created music in the 60s and 70s and 80s, maybe even 90s, where it was a bit of a gravy train. If you had a hit, literally, you had a massive hit all over the world. It sold tens of millions of copies, and you were sorted. That was it. You were ready. You know, you're okay for the rest of your life. You only went on tours to actually promote the record. These days, it's very hard for musicians to actually make money. So obviously, live has become very, very important. I've got a colleague down here, Brian, who's very much into sort of experiential marketing, the whole triggers, emotional triggers of branding and music. A brand now, instead of looking at traditionally using music and just television or radio, the experiential point about, you know, the festival, the 3-day event, you know, the sports music tie-in maybe with Manchester City, is that the way that you see maybe over the next year or two sort of brands integrating music into what they're doing?
Yeah, I think it depends on the actual campaign. We've done major experiential things here. We launched the Man City kit last year here, and anyone who bought the kit basically got 2 tickets for a gig, which we put on at the City of Manchester Stadium, which was headlined by Doves and had 4 other Manchester-based Man City supporting bands. So the whole thing all wrapped up again. I think so experiential is definitely a part of our mix. It's not kind of, I say, our complete future at all times. It depends on what we're trying to achieve at each moment in time.
John, we've talked about the brands integrating with bands and music, and obviously instead of the top-down model that traditionally we had, you know, somebody dictating it from London, now the grassroots movement of, you know, community radio, smaller radio groups, producers, local, sort of finding music, developing music or genres of music, and then filtering that up. How is, from experience, how easy is it for a company working in Manchester, and obviously Umbro we leave out of this because the guys are here in the city and they understand what's happening, but for other national brands, if you were trying to make contact to integrate something, you know, you've got artists that are appearing and think this is great, or managers looking at the music scene, how easy is it for them to break through onto a national level? Are there sort of gatekeepers that you try and get through in order to make things happen? And we'll probably bring Danny in a minute as well on this.
Yeah, I think Danny can probably talk more about gatekeepers, but from my own experiences, it's more about you know, working in DIY culture. It's having budgets, so you may have ideas, but you can't really realistically do everything at once. So you have to be very good at your strategy and put money in the right place. And if it doesn't have any returns, then you're stumped and you can't really
absolutely
take it to the next stage that you probably, if you had the budget there, you'd be able to do it, and it might have had some success. So,
and Danny, you know, with obviously signed and unsigned acts, how easy is it to try to break through that sort of that glass ceiling, as far as trying to integrate maybe with the larger agencies or marketing agencies that are working with these brands? You know, if you make an approach, is it? I would expect it's very hard, but is it harder than I expect?
Well, yeah, it's pretty hard really, because like not only have you got to find a balance with, because we do 80% unsigned bands, you see, and like 20% newly signed bands, and that's like how recently we've had to like make our like income, and because most of the time like most of the record companies and like the other gatekeepers, they're looking for something with like a gimmick, something which is going to sell, something which is going to make a return. So you're not always going to go with something which sounds interesting, new, fresh. You're going to go with something which you know is going to make you a return and is going to make you a profit in the long run. And like in so many circumstances, we've had artists coming back saying, we kind of signed this, and then like we thought we were going to get all this money, and then they're being forced to pay it back later on the line. So in the short run, like you're finding a lot of people who may have like money in the pocket and they're able to create like a whole host of albums, but when they are selling all these albums, they're still in debt and they're having to pay all this back. So it's really hard at the moment, like being an artist. Hence, like that's why we're trying to come in. Especially like we thought we'd be able to push on a lot more, but especially with all these cuts and such, it's harder for us to do what we do. So like it is hard at the moment, but it's not impossible.
Just obviously looking at from the point of, John Ford, when you're looking at the communication strategy, maybe a brand would come to yourself and talk about, and then you're looking at how you integrate music into that. Do you find that there's a disconnect between sometimes the objectives that musicians would have, or labels or producers, and the objectives that the brand are trying to get across, that there's maybe something lost in translation between the two parties? The brand has got certain ideas of what they would like to achieve and objectives, and maybe sometimes the bands or the musicians or the managers don't really understand the linkage between the two.
Well, working with Red Bull, we work on Red Bull Bedroom Jam, which is one of Red Bull's youth music initiatives. As I was saying to you earlier, effectively it's a 19-year-old in his room, male, plays guitar, wants to be in Lost Prophets. Done. That's who it is. Okay. In terms of musicians getting involved with brands and Bedroom Jam, actually there's no barriers whatsoever. And we're really lucky to work with a brand like Red Bull, because as you're probably aware from a lot of what Red Bull do, they do their marketing via association. So they do cool things, and through that you think they might be cool, and you might drink Red Bull. Okay, that's how they do it. When it comes to Bedroom Jam, anyone can upload their music, and the only barriers that get in the way of you succeeding, and there is no winning in it, the key part about it is that it isn't the X factor, it's investment in music and talent, which is why they built a studio in London that by invitation pretty much anyone can use, and we've got unknown bands in there now making albums. The only barrier to that is your talent and your ability to promote yourself. Back in January, we launched this year's campaign, which was driven via a buzz chart very similar to the one that you can find on the Wonderful in the City app. And in the same way, I think theirs is powered, theirs, all of theirs, is powered by SoundCloud and tweets and that kind of thing. Ours took into account hits and plays on our MIDI site, but also MySpace, Facebook, similar stuff, social stuff. That allowed the brand to spread virally every time a user shared a link to a specific band's page. It moved them further up the chart. It's a measure of trending and popularity, and the bands that people love the most then got opportunities. Again, no prizes, this isn't X Factor. The ones that went through, we went to their houses, we broadcast them on the net. I think around 6 months, the site had done about 1.5 million hits.
Excellent. And
spread across all social networks. As a band, there's no barriers. The barrier is you can upload a video, and then you can tell people about it through any means possible. And the band we currently have in the studio will be putting out an album next year, but this isn't a deal where you're signed or you're unsigned. It doesn't exist anymore. Arctic Monkeys obviously was the milestone that people always talk about where that broke down. This album's going to come out through a contra deal with Rock Sound magazine. So we're going to relaunch next year's campaign, starting with an album that's been recorded in Red Bull Studios. They're not signed to a label. We've just been recorded, and it's getting put out. And I think 20,000 people or whatever will receive that album.
Excellent.
And there's no horrible sponsorship involved there. There's no, go back a few years, a brand being involved with a band is effectively selling out. We know that bands struggle to make money nowadays through record sales, so money has to come from somewhere, so you want that money to come from the least intrusive place possible. And coming and playing on our stages at festivals, like major festivals all through the summer, and then making an album with us is pretty unintrusive to what you want to do.
Excellent.
That's what all bands want to do.